The morning sun cast long shadows across the reservation as Maria Lightfoot packed her few belongings into a worn canvas bag. Her hands trembled as she folded the traditional blanket her grandmother had woven, knowing she might never see another like it. The tribal council's decision echoed in her mind like thunder that wouldn't fade. She was to leave before sunset, never to return. The pregnancy had been discovered 3 weeks ago during the harvest ceremony. What should have been a time of celebration became her downfall. The father was David Clearwater, the chief's nephew, who had been promised to another woman since childhood. When Maria revealed her condition, David denied everything, claiming she had shamed herself with outsiders. The tribal elders believed him without question. Maria's own family turned their backs on her. Her mother, once her closest confidant, wouldn't even look at her during the council meeting. Her father spoke the harshest words of all, saying she had brought dishonor to their bloodline that stretched back 7 generations. The weight of their disappointment crushed her spirit more than the exile itself. As she walked through the village for the last time, children who once ran to greet her now hid behind their mother's skirts. Women who had taught her traditional crafts whispered behind cupped hands. The men avoided her gaze entirely, as if looking upon her would somehow contaminate them. Each step toward the reservation border felt like a small death. The security guard at the gate, Thomas Running Bear, had known her since childhood. His eyes held sympathy, but his duty was clear. He watched silently as she signed the papers that officially severed her ties to the tribe. With each signature, she felt pieces of her identity slip away like sand through her fingers. Standing at the highway with nothing but her bag and $17, Maria touched her still, flat stomach. The child growing inside her was innocent of the chaos it had caused. She made a silent promise that no matter what happened, she would protect this baby and give it the love she was now denied. A truck appeared in the distance, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. The elderly Mexican driver, Ramon, took pity on the young woman standing alone by the roadside. He was heading to the next town and offered her a ride. As the reservation disappeared behind them, Maria pressed her face to the window, saying goodbye to the only world she had ever known. The mountains that had sheltered her childhood now seemed like prison walls she was finally escaping. In the truck's warm cab, Ramon shared stories of his own struggles as a young father. He spoke of times when he had nothing but hope to feed his family, yet somehow they survived. His kindness was the first she had experienced in weeks, and tears flowed freely down her cheeks. When he dropped her at a small diner in Clearwater Falls, he pressed a $20 bill into her hand despite her protests. The diner was nearly empty at this late hour. A tired waitress with kind eyes served her coffee and a sandwich, accepting her story without judgment. The woman, Sarah, mentioned that folks in this area were generally good people who helped those in need. She suggested Maria try the Johnson Ranch outside town, as they sometimes hired seasonal workers and provided housing. As Maria sat in that diner booth, she felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't experienced since learning of her pregnancy: hope. The baby kicked gently as if sensing her change in mood. Perhaps exile wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of something entirely new. She studied the local newspaper Sarah had given her, circling job advertisements and housing options. The next morning would bring new challenges, but for the first time in months, Maria felt she might have the strength to face them. She had lost her tribe, her family, and her identity, but she still had her determination and the precious life growing within her. Outside the diner window, the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, promising a fresh start. The Johnson Ranch stretched across rolling hills dotted with cattle, its weathered barn and sturdy fences telling stories of generations of hard work. Maria walked the long gravel driveway, her bag growing heavier with each step. The morning air was crisp and clean, so different from the dusty reservation roads she had known all her life. Horses grazed peacefully in nearby pastures, lifting their heads to watch her approach with curious eyes. Jack Johnson was mending fence near the main house when he spotted the young woman walking up his drive. At 42, he had learned to read people quickly, and something about her determined stride despite obvious exhaustion caught his attention. His wife Emma had been gone 2 years now, lost to cancer, leaving him to raise their twin boys alone. The loneliness of the big house sometimes felt overwhelming, but he had managed to keep the ranch running and his sons fed and clothed. When Maria knocked on the front door. Jack was surprised to find himself facing a pregnant Native American woman who couldn't be more than 19. She stood straight despite her obvious weariness, her dark eyes meeting his without shame or apology. She explained simply that she needed work and a place to stay, offering to do anything from cooking to ranch work in exchange for room and board. Jack's twin sons, 12-year-old Luke and Danny, peered around the doorframe with undisguised curiosity. They hadn't seen a woman at their house since their mother's funeral, and their father's awkward attempts at cooking and housekeeping had become a family joke. The house showed signs of their bachelor lifestyle, with dishes piled in the sink and laundry overflowing from baskets. Something in Maria's eyes reminded Jack of a wounded animal he had once found, fierce but vulnerable. He made a quick decision. That surprised even him, offering her the small apartment above the barn in exchange for helping with meals and light housework. The boys would be back in school soon, and he could use someone to be there when they got home. Maria accepted gratefully, tears threatening to spill as she realized her prayers had been answered. The apartment was simple but clean, with a small kitchenette and a comfortable bed. Jack helped her carry her single bag upstairs, noticing how little she had brought with her. He didn't ask questions about her circumstances, sensing that some stories needed time before they could be told. Instead, he showed her around the ranch and explained the daily routines that kept everything running smoothly. That evening, Maria prepared her first meal for the Johnson family. Using simple ingredients from their well-stocked pantry, she created a feast that reminded the boys of their mother's cooking. Luke and Danny, initially shy around this stranger, began to warm up as she asked about their school and interests. She listened intently to their stories about football practice and their struggles with math homework. Jack watched from the kitchen doorway as Maria helped Danny with his arithmetic, while Luke cleared the table without being asked. The house felt different with her presence, warmer somehow, as if life was slowly returning to rooms that had been merely functional for too long. He noticed how naturally she moved around the kitchen, how she seemed to anticipate what was needed without being told. After the boys went to bed, Jack and Maria sat on the front porch talking quietly. She shared fragments of her story, the exile and rejection, while he spoke of his struggles raising boys alone and keeping the ranch profitable. Neither offered advice or judgment, but the simple act of being heard felt healing for both of them. The night air carried the sounds of cattle settling and owls calling from the nearby trees. As weeks passed, Maria found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose early to prepare breakfast, packed lunches for the boys, and spent her days helping with various tasks around the property. Her pregnancy progressed steadily, and she felt stronger than she had in months. The boys had begun calling her Maria instead of ma'am, and she noticed Jack watching her with something warmer than mere appreciation for her help. The first real test came when Luke fell ill with flu and had to stay home from school. Maria tended to him with such gentle care that when Danny also came down with the illness, he specifically asked for her to bring him soup and read to him. Jack watched from the hallway as she smoothed cool cloths on fevered foreheads and told stories that made sick children smile. One evening, as Maria prepared dinner, she felt the baby kick strongly. Without thinking, she placed her hand on her rounded belly and smiled. Luke noticed and asked if he could feel the baby move. Soon both boys were taking turns feeling the gentle movements, their faces filled with wonder. Jack stood nearby, remembering when Emma had been pregnant, but instead of sadness, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of happiness returning to his home. The autumn leaves painted the ranch in brilliant golds and reds as Maria entered her 7th month of pregnancy. Her daily routines had become second nature, and the Johnson family had grown accustomed to her quiet presence that somehow made everything run more smoothly. She had transformed the house from a place where men merely survived into a home where they thrived, with regular meals, clean clothes, and the subtle touches that only a woman's care could provide. Jack found himself looking forward to coming in from the fields each day, knowing Maria would be in the kitchen preparing something delicious while helping the boys with homework. Her influence on Luke and Danny had been remarkable. Their grades improved, their attitudes brightened, and they seemed more confident and settled than they had been since their mother's death. They had begun including Maria in their school projects and proudly introduced her to teachers at parent Conferences. The town of Clearwater Falls was small enough that everyone noticed when Jack Johnson began bringing a pregnant Native American woman to church and community events. Some whispers followed them, questions about who she was and where she had come from. But Jack's reputation as an honest, hard-working man carried weight. When pressed by curious neighbors, he simply said Maria was helping with the boys and left it at that. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the town's only physician, became Maria's first real friend outside the Johnson family. During routine prenatal visits, she noticed Maria's reluctance to discuss her past and gently coaxed out pieces of her story. Dr. Hernandez had seen enough of life to understand that sometimes good people found themselves in impossible situations, and she made sure Maria knew she had support without conditions or judgment. The first serious challenge came when Maria's pregnancy complications required bed rest during her 8th month. Jack immediately rearranged his schedule to be home more often, while Luke and Danny took on additional responsibilities without complaint. They brought her meals, read to her, and kept her company during the long days when she worried about being a burden. Their easy acceptance of her condition touched her deeply. One evening, as Maria lay resting, she overheard Jack talking to his brother Tom on the phone. Tom was questioning Jack's wisdom in taking in a pregnant stranger, suggesting it would be better for everyone if Maria made other arrangements before the baby arrived. Jack's response was firm and immediate. Maria was family now, and anyone who couldn't accept that wasn't welcome at his ranch. The conviction in his voice brought tears to Maria's eyes. The town's annual harvest festival approached, and despite her condition, Maria insisted on helping prepare food for the Johnson family's traditional contribution. She taught Luke and Danny to make traditional cornbread using recipes her grandmother had taught her, sharing stories of her childhood and the rich cultural heritage she had been forced to leave behind. The boys listened with fascination, asking thoughtful questions about tribal customs and beliefs. Jack surprised everyone, including himself, when he asked Maria to accompany him to the harvest dance. She was hesitant, worried about how it would look for a very pregnant woman to attend such an event, but Jack insisted he would be proud to escort her. The boys enthusiastically supported the idea, offering to help her find something suitable to wear from their mother's clothing that Jack had been unable to give away. At the dance, Maria felt nervous as they entered the decorated community center. However, the warm welcome from Dr. Hernandez and several other families quickly put her at ease. She watched Jack dance with other women out of politeness while she sat with the other mothers, discussing children and sharing stories. When a slow song began, Jack appeared at her side and gently led her onto the dance floor despite her protests about her condition. As they swayed together to the gentle music, Maria felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood, the sense of belonging somewhere. Jack's strong arms guided her carefully, and she could see Luke and Danny watching from across the room with expressions of pure happiness. Other couples smiled as they passed, and she realized that the community was slowly accepting her presence in Jack's life. The evening took an unexpected turn when Maria began feeling strange pains during the last dance. She tried to ignore them at first, not wanting to spoil the perfect evening, but when they intensified, she quietly told Jack she needed to leave. Dr. Hernandez, who had been watching Maria carefully all evening, immediately recognized the signs and insisted they head straight to her clinic rather than waiting until morning. As Jack helped Maria into his truck, she gripped his hand tightly during another contraction. Luke and Danny climbed into the back seat, their earlier joy replaced with worry for the woman who had become so important to their daily lives. Jack drove quickly but carefully through the dark country roads while Dr. Hernandez followed in her own vehicle, everyone hoping they would reach the clinic in time. At the small medical facility, Dr. Hernandez confirmed what they all suspected. Maria was in early labor. The baby was coming nearly a month ahead of schedule, and while that wasn't necessarily dangerous, it would require careful monitoring. Jack paced the waiting room while Luke and Danny sat quietly holding hands. All three men united in their concern for the woman who had quietly become the heart of their family. The labor lasted through the night and into the early morning hours. Jack never left the clinic, pacing the small waiting room while Luke and Danny dozed fitfully in uncomfortable chairs. Dr. Hernandez emerged periodically to update them on Maria's progress, her professional calm reassuring, but not entirely masking her concern about the premature delivery. The boys had never experienced anything like this, having been too young to remember their mother's difficult final days. When the baby's cries finally pierced the quiet dawn air, Jack felt his knees nearly give out with relief. Dr. Hernandez appeared with a tired but genuine smile, announcing that Maria had delivered a healthy baby girl weighing just over 5 pounds. The baby was small but strong, with good lungs and all the fight necessary to thrive. Maria was exhausted but doing well, asking repeatedly if the Johnson men were still there waiting for her. Jack entered the delivery room first, his weathered hands trembling as he approached the bed where Maria held her tiny daughter. The baby had thick black hair and dark eyes that seemed to look right through him to his soul. Maria looked up at Jack with tears streaming down her face, not of sadness but of overwhelming gratitude. She whispered that she wanted to name the baby Grace, because Grace was what had led her to their family. Luke and Danny tiptoed into the room with expressions of absolute wonder. They had expected to feel awkward around a newborn, but Grace seemed to cast a spell over everyone who saw her. Danny was the first to ask if he could hold her, and with Maria's guidance, he cradled the tiny bundle with surprising natural skill. Luke followed, his 12-year-old tough exterior melting away as Grace wrapped her impossibly small fingers around his thumb. The next few days passed in a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and the organized chaos that comes with a newborn. Jack had converted the small room next to Maria's apartment into a nursery, working late into the night to assemble a crib and baby furniture while Maria recovered. The boys took turns helping with baby care, learning to warm bottles and fold tiny clothes with the concentration they usually reserved for video games. Maria's recovery was complicated by her emotional state. While physically she healed well, she struggled with waves of sadness that seemed to come from nowhere. Dr. Hernandez explained that postpartum depression was common, especially for someone who had experienced trauma and loss. Maria worried constantly that she was burdening the Johnson family, that they hadn't signed up to care for both her and a crying baby who woke everyone at night. Jack surprised everyone with his natural ability to soothe the fussy infant. He would walk the floors with Grace during her colicky evenings, singing old country songs in his deep, steady voice until she settled peacefully against his chest. Luke and Danny watched their father transform before their eyes, seeing him display a gentleness they remembered from their early childhood, but thought had died with their mother. The first real crisis came when Grace developed a fever at 3 weeks old. Maria panicked, her inexperience as a mother colliding with memories of stories about babies who didn't survive their first months. Jack remained calm, bundling both Maria and Grace into his truck for an immediate trip to Dr. Hernandez's clinic. The diagnosis was a simple cold, easily treatable, but the scare brought everyone's emotions to the surface. That night, as Maria sat rocking a peaceful Grace, Jack found her crying quietly in the nursery. She confessed her fears about being a terrible mother, about having made a mistake in keeping the baby, about ruining his family's life with her presence. Jack's response was immediate and firm. She was the best thing that had happened to his family in years, and Grace was a blessing they were all grateful to share. The conversation that followed changed everything between them. Jack admitted that he had feelings for Maria that went beyond gratitude for her help with the boys. Maria revealed that she had fallen in love with not just Jack, but with the life they had built together, though she feared her past would always cast a shadow over their future. They talked until sunrise, sharing fears and hopes while Grace slept peacefully between them. Luke and Danny had their own adjustment period with the new baby. Initially excited about having a sister figure, they sometimes felt overlooked when Grace demanded so much attention. A particularly difficult evening arose when Danny exploded in frustration, claiming that everything had been better before the baby arrived and disrupted their routine. Maria was devastated by his outburst, but Jack handled it with wisdom. Jack sat both boys down for a serious conversation about family, responsibility, and love. He explained that families weren't always formed in traditional ways, and that sometimes the most precious relationships came from unexpected circumstances. He reminded them of how lonely and lost they had all been before Maria arrived, and how much joy she had brought into their lives even before Grace was born. The turning point came when Grace smiled for the first time, a genuine response to Danny making funny faces at her during a feeding. The 12-year-old's entire demeanor changed as he realized this tiny person actually recognized and responded to him. From that moment forward, both boys became fiercely protective of their baby sister, taking pride in their ability to make her laugh and comfort her when she cried. As winter approached, the little family had found its rhythm. Maria had regained her strength and confidence as a mother, while Jack had discovered that his heart was capable of loving again in ways he hadn't thought possible. The boys had matured remarkably, taking on responsibilities without complaint and showing a level of emotional intelligence that impressed their teachers and neighbors. Grace was thriving, growing stronger each day and bringing laughter to a house that had been too quiet for too long. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it both new beginnings and unexpected challenges. Grace was now 6 months old, a chubby, happy baby who had completely captured the hearts of everyone in Clearwater Falls. She had Jack's determined chin and Maria's expressive dark eyes, and her laughter could brighten even the most difficult days. The town had fully embraced the unusual family, with local women offering advice and hand-me-down clothes without being asked. Jack's feelings for Maria had deepened into something he recognized as love, though he struggled with how to express it appropriately. He didn't want to pressure her or make her feel obligated because of his generosity in taking her in. Maria wrestled with similar emotions, loving Jack and his boys but fearing that her presence was still temporary, that one day they might decide they were ready to move on without the complications her past represented. The spring planting season brought extra work and longer days, but also opportunities for the family to work together in new ways. Maria proved surprisingly capable with the ranch animals, showing a natural gentleness that the horses and cattle responded to immediately. Luke and Danny had grown inches over the winter and were now genuinely helpful with the heavier ranch work, proud to be treated as young men rather than children. Dr. Hernandez had become not just Maria's physician, but also her closest female friend and confidant. During one of Grace's regular checkups, she gently suggested that Maria might benefit from talking to someone about her experiences with the tribe and the emotional trauma of exile. Maria was initially resistant, but Dr. Hernandez arranged for her to speak with a counselor who specialized in helping people from minority communities deal with cultural displacement. The counseling sessions were difficult at first, forcing Maria to confront feelings of abandonment and worthlessness she had buried beneath her gratitude for the Johnson family's acceptance. She learned to separate her worth as a person from the circumstances that had led to her exile, and began to understand that she deserved happiness and love not because she was useful, but because she was inherently valuable as a human being. Jack noticed the changes in Maria as she worked through her emotions. She stood taller, spoke more confidently about her opinions, and began making decisions about Grace's care without constantly seeking his approval. The transformation was beautiful to watch, though it also made him realize that as Maria grew stronger, she might decide she no longer needed the security his ranch provided. The first serious test of their relationship came when Jack received a job offer from a larger ranch in Wyoming that would double his income and provide better opportunities for the boy's future. The decision would have been easy a year ago, but now he found himself paralyzed by the thought of disrupting the life Maria had built in Clearwater Falls. When he shared the opportunity with her, her immediate response was to encourage him to take it, insisting she could find work elsewhere and wouldn't hold his family back. Jack's response surprised them both. He turned down the job without hesitation, explaining that money wasn't worth losing what they had built together. Maria was overwhelmed by his choice but also frightened by the implications. If she was important enough to influence such major decisions, then their relationship had moved beyond simple gratitude and convenience into territory that felt both wonderful and terrifying. Luke and Danny were struggling with their own confusing emotions about Maria's role in their lives. They loved her and couldn't imagine life without her and Grace, but they also felt guilty about loving someone other than their deceased mother. Jack found Danny crying in the barn one evening, torn between his affection for Maria and his fear that accepting her meant betraying his mother's memory. Jack's conversation with his sons about love, loss, and family became one of the most important talks of their young lives. He explained that loving Maria didn't diminish their love for their mother, just as Grace's presence didn't replace their mother's importance in their family history. He helped them understand that their mother would have wanted them to be happy and to welcome love when it appeared in their lives. The breakthrough moment came during a violent spring storm that knocked out power and threatened the ranch buildings. Maria worked alongside Jack and the boys to secure the animals and protect the property. Her competence and courage during the crisis earning new levels of respect from everyone. When a tree fell across the road, trapping them together for 3 days, the enforced closeness brought conversations and realizations that might have taken months to develop otherwise. On the second night of their isolation, with Grace sleeping peacefully and the boys occupied with board games by candlelight, Jack and Maria found themselves alone on the couch talking quietly. The conversation turned to their future together, and for the first time both admitted their fears about making their arrangement permanent. Jack worried about the age difference and whether Maria might someday resent giving up her independence. Maria feared that her past would eventually catch up with them and bring shame or danger to his family. Jack's proposal came not as a grand, romantic gesture but as a quiet statement of fact during their storm-bound conversation. He told Maria that he loved her, wanted to adopt Grace as his own daughter, and hoped she would consider becoming his wife not out of gratitude or convenience, but because they had built something beautiful together that deserved to be honored and protected. Maria's acceptance was equally quiet, but no less profound. She admitted that she had been afraid to hope for such happiness, but that she loved him and his boys completely and wanted nothing more than to make their unconventional family official. The kiss they shared was gentle and full of promises, witnessed only by the flickering candlelight and the peaceful sounds of Grace breathing softly in her crib. When the storm cleared and normal life resumed, Luke and Danny immediately noticed the change in their father and Maria. The boys' reaction was pure joy, with Luke immediately asking if this meant Maria would be their real mother and Grace would be their real sister. Jack explained that love made families real, not just legal documents, but that yes, they would be making everything official as soon as possible. The wedding planning brought unexpected joy to the entire community of Clearwater Falls. Maria had worried that a simple ceremony would be more appropriate given their circumstances, but the townspeople had embraced their love story so completely that they insisted on helping create a celebration worthy of the happiness Jack and Maria had found. Together, Dr. Hernandez organized the women of the town to help with flowers and food, while the men worked with Jack to prepare the ranch for the outdoor ceremony they had decided upon. Maria struggled with the absence of her own family during the preparations. She had sent a letter to the reservation months ago, informing them of Grace's birth and her engagement, but received no response. The silence hurt, but she was learning to find strength in the family she had chosen rather than mourning the one that had rejected her. Luke and Danny stepped up to help fill that void, insisting on escorting her down the aisle together, since they would soon be her sons in every way that mattered. Jack's brother Tom arrived from Denver with his own family, having overcome his initial skepticism about the relationship after meeting Maria and seeing how dramatically she had changed Jack and the boys. Tom's wife Sarah became an instant ally, helping Maria shop for a wedding dress and offering practical advice about married life with Johnson men. Their children quickly bonded with Grace, who was now crawling everywhere and delighting everyone with her babbling attempts at conversation. The legal aspects of their union required some careful navigation. Jack's lawyer helped them understand the process of his adopting Grace, which Maria welcomed enthusiastically. She wanted Grace to carry the Johnson name and have the security of legal recognition as Jack's daughter. The paperwork also included provisions for Maria to have legal standing as Luke and Danny's stepmother, something that brought tears to her eyes when she realized how completely the law would recognize their blended family. 3 days before the wedding, Maria received an unexpected visitor that shook her to her core. Her cousin Anna Lightfoot arrived unannounced, having driven from the reservation after hearing rumors about Maria's new life. Anna brought news that David Clearwater, the man who had denied being Grace's father, had been arrested for assaulting another young woman. The truth about his character was finally coming to light, and some tribal members were beginning to question the justice of Maria's exile. Anna's visit forced Maria to confront feelings she thought she had resolved. Her cousin apologized for the family's treatment and begged her to consider returning to the reservation, where she could raise Grace within their cultural traditions. The offer was tempting in some ways, representing a chance to reclaim her heritage and give Grace knowledge of her Native American roots. But Maria realized that her life was no longer on the reservation, but with the family she had built in Clearwater Falls. Jack found Maria sitting by the creek that evening, clearly troubled by her cousin's visit. When she explained the situation, his immediate response was to support whatever decision would make her happiest, even if it meant losing her. His willingness to let her go if it was best for her only reinforced Maria's certainty that her place was beside him. She had learned the difference between a family that loved conditionally and one that loved completely. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with wildflowers blooming across the ranch and the mountains providing a stunning backdrop for their vows. Maria wore a simple white dress with traditional beadwork Anna had brought as a peace offering, symbolizing the blend of cultures that would characterize their marriage. Grace, now 11 months old and taking her first tentative steps, served as an adorable flower girl with Luke and Danny guiding her down the aisle. Jack's vows spoke of unexpected gifts and second chances, of how Maria had brought not just organization to his household but life to his heart. Maria's words focused on finding home in the last place she had expected it, and her gratitude for a love that had no conditions or expiration date. When they exchanged rings, Grace clapped her hands and babbled something that sounded remarkably like Dada and Mama, bringing laughter and tears from the assembled guests. The celebration continued late into the evening, with dancing under string lights and stories shared about the journey that had brought this unlikely family together. Luke and Danny gave a joint toast that moved everyone to tears, thanking Maria for bringing happiness back to their home and promising to be the best big brothers Grace could ask for. Even Anna stayed for the festivities, finally understanding why Maria had chosen this life over returning to the reservation. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Jack and Maria found a quiet moment together on the porch, where they had shared so many important conversations. Grace slept peacefully in Maria's arms while Luke and Danny cleaned up inside, chattering excitedly about their new roles as official family members. The ranch that had once felt too empty now hummed with the energy of a complete family. 6 months later, Maria received another letter from the reservation, this one from the tribal council, formally apologizing for their treatment of her and inviting her to return with full restoration of her rights and status. The letter came too late to change her path, but not too late to heal old wounds. She and Jack decided to take the children to visit the reservation, allowing Grace to learn about her heritage while making it clear that their home would always be the ranch. Looking back, Maria often marveled at how completely her life had changed from that desperate morning when she walked away from the only world she had known. The scared, pregnant girl who had knocked on Jack's door had become a confident woman, wife, and mother who had found her place in the world not through blood or tradition, but through the courage to accept love when it was offered. Her family might not look like what anyone had planned, but it was built on a foundation of mutual respect, genuine affection, and the understanding that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. The Johnson Ranch continued to thrive, not just as a working cattle operation, but as a home where love grew stronger each day. Grace took her first real steps in the kitchen where Maria had cooked her first meal for the family. Luke and Danny became the young men their mother would have been proud of, and Jack discovered that his heart was capable of even greater love than he had thought possible. Their story became legend in Clearwater Falls, proof that family is created not by blood alone, but by the willingness to open one's heart to those who need a place to belong.